Hey guys, I'm back, and if you saw yesterday's video, you saw that I shared with you Nicholas's feeding journey, and so I am back today to tell you all about Audrey's. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and watch it. I'll put it in the eye in the sky, and watch that one and then come back and watch this one, because it'll make a little more sense if you watch his first and then Audrey's. So let's get started talking about Audrey's. So Audrey was born November 29th, 2011. Audrey was induced on her due date because I had gestational diabetes with her. It was an easy labor, and she practically fell out, to be honest. But that's for another time when I actually do her birth story. Audrey was born, and she had a lot of problems latching. I kind of fell right back into exclusively into pumping and bottle feeding her because I was nervous that she wasn't eating. She was more jaundiced than Nicholas ever was. So I started pumping and bottle feeding her kind of right after we got home from the hospital. At the hospital, she just was not latching right. It was so painful. She was doing a lot of damage. And so when we got home, she'd done so much damage that I felt that pumping and bottle feeding her was just easier and better for both of us. So I started doing that. A couple days, I want to say like 10, 11, about 10 days into her life and this trying to nurse her and not being able to, and just could not latch. And I had reached out to a friend who runs in the Leche League group back where I'm from online, and she had said, you know what, maybe she has a tongue tie. I had never heard of a tongue tie, so I sent her a picture, and sure enough, she was like, yes, it definitely looks like a tongue tie, definitely sounds like the damage she's doing is caused by her inability to get her tongue up and over her bottom lip. So if you don't know what a tongue tie is, Google it, but essentially it's the frenulum, which is this little piece of skin that attaches your tongue to the bottom of your mouth, is too far forward. So then it doesn't allow the babies to fully extend their tongue out over their lip, which gives them a better latch when they're nursing. So that's a brief description. Google it if you want to know more. There's plenty of research out there now. But anyway, she said, and so I reached out to her. Then I reached out to our friend that was a local lactation consultant at the hospital that I gave birth to Audrey in, and said, hey, I have this friend who runs the Leche League. She's seen this before. She thinks it's a tongue tie. Can you diagnose it for me? So I made an appointment with her. This was, Audrey was I think 11 days old. I brought Audrey in. She was super sleepy, and they were like, oh, she's so cuddly, and sure enough, they diagnosed her with a tongue tie. She said, call your pediatrician, see if they have a recommendation on getting it fixed, because it will certainly help things, and there's a chance you can get her back to the breast at this point, but it's going to take a lot of work. So I called my pediatrician. He said, sure, come in, I'll look at it, I'll give you a referral, whatever. This was at 4 o'clock on a Saturday. Fast forward to 3 or 5, it was between 3 and 5 a.m. the next day. Audrey, I went to pick Audrey up out of the rock and play next to our bed to feed her a bottle and pump at the same time. And immediately upon picking her up, I woke my husband up and I said, she's burning hot. I mean, she was I can't even describe to you how warm she was. And he said, oh, she's probably just warm because she was swaddled and in the rock and play and whatever. And I said, no, this kid is warm. So I undressed or whatever. Dan felt her and he said, yeah, doesn't seem right. So we took her temperature and it was 101 point something, which is very high for at that point, I think she was 11 or 12 days old. It's high. Any fever is worrisome for a newborn baby. So I called our pediatrician's office. The doctor on call said, you need to get her to an ER immediately. So then we were in the hospital and they ran all kinds of tests. They were running all kinds of tests. So they do, when you have a sick newborn, by the way, one with a fever, they do a spinal tap. which they don't feel because the nerves in their spine are not mature enough. They do a urinalysis and they do a blood culture. So those are the three things. And so we spent a couple days with her, at least for the first 2 days. I want to say she was in the isolette. We couldn't move her because the line that was going through her umbilical stump was so barely in there that just moving her out of her isolette could cause it to fall out, which would mean they would have to put an IV in. Until the Children's Hospital people came and actually put a PICC line in, which was like a deep vein IV. So we were waiting for them because this was Sunday. We were waiting for them to come Monday. So it was 24 hours is what it was. So yeah, for 24 hours I couldn't pick her up. So I spent the entire time that we were in the NICU, so the entire time we were in the NICU part, which was for the first like 7 days of our stay, I spent that time pumping every 2 hours. And so I had this huge stockpile to the point where my husband was going home with like giant clear bags of those little 2.5 ounce tubes to put in our deep freeze. And then I continued to try and do an SNS, which is just like a supplemental nursing system where you put the milk in, and you tape it to your breast, and then you have the baby suck. And then that didn't work so great. Oh, and then finally we were able to get someone to come clip her tongue tie while we were in there. So they were like, yeah, let's just do it while she's in the NICU laying in this bed. So they did that because she had to be in there for 10 days to get antibiotics. We had her tongue tie clipped, and she just didn't want to go back to the breast. She was so used to the bottle because in the hospital they were making me, I had to use bottles because she was strapped down and for a while, and then I could hold her, but still, like, she was so out of it and fussy and whatever from the Tylenol that she just wasn't even trying to nurse. So yeah, so we just continued, and I just fell into the routine of pumping for her, and we never really looked back. I just decided that was the right fit for us, and it felt right. And honestly, here was my system. I had a double electric pump that I hooked into my bra, and I would pump and bottle feed her off to the side, so like kind of she was next to me, so like here. She would sit in one of those boppy pillows. So my nursing pillows my boppy pillow, which was made for nursing, came in handy for the first 2 kids for bottle feeding. So you know, even if you're not going to nurse, that pillow is fantastic. And I would just hold the bottle and pump at the same time. And that's how I got things done. And we did that for an entire year. So I exclusively pumped for Audrey for all 12 months. For 9 out of 12 of those months, I worked full-time outside the home and just continued to pump. Our daycare was extremely supportive, and they did a great job of making sure they didn't waste any breast milk. And that's kind of what we did, and that was our life. So that's my journey with Audrey. It's definitely very different than my journey with Nicholas, besides the fact that I did exclusively pump with her. I had a lot more tools in my exclusively pumping tool chest to be able to pump for her for longer than I did for Nicholas. I had a huge head start. It's funny because like that time in the hospital was terrifying. Like I wouldn't wish it on anyone. However, it allowed me to stockpile almost, I think, like 200 ounces of milk, which is like huge. So, or 300. It was like a ton of milk. Literally, we had a deep freeze full of those bottles. So it allowed me to stockpile, which allowed me to hit that 1-year mark of exclusively pumping with her. So, yeah, and she is a happy, healthy, intelligent, loving, creative, left-handed, spunky, dramatic 4.5-year-old. I wouldn't go back and do anything differently. Her journey is the way that it's the way it should have been. And, I learned a lot. We watched, it was a miracle watching her get sick from her brother's cold and find something underlying that would have made her potentially given her brain damage or killed her a few months later. So, that's all part of the story. So, thanks for listening to Audrey's story. Comment below, tell me about your breastfeeding or bottle feeding or infant feeding journey. Remember to look up #FedIsBest to get support. And as always, click thumbs up if you like this video. Make sure you hit subscribe so you can follow me, and I will see you tomorrow.